All righty. We are here to talk with Coach Hag and Keenan Hagerty, little father-son action here. We've got a few different topics to talk to them about. I think everyone knows who these guys are, but just in case you don't, Coach Hag, former high school coach, big deal at USA Wrestling, Hall of Famer. Keenan, he's a coach at Maryville University, and there's a lot of these guys could talk about, but we're going to start them off with the question that I think would actually benefit a lot of other people too. Let's talk about, and you guys can jump in on this however you want, what are some of the do's and don'ts of father-son coaching relationships? Go ahead.
Keenan, go ahead.
Go ahead. The do's and don'ts. Well, I didn't get to coach a son yet, so he's probably got a little more insight. I got to start off, with the Greg Warren quote. For those of you guys that know, Greg Warren wrestled for his dad in high school, and everybody always talked to him. He said, did he push you? And he's like, yeah, he pushed me, but he pushed me in sports,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a normal thing to push your kid in. He said, there's people out there that are pushing their kids to find Bigfoot. How would you like to have that guy for a dad? So, yeah, he did, but I accepted it.
Yeah, that's a tough one because there's so many parts to that question. Obviously, the greatest thing is to have that opportunity. And I think that if you do get that opportunity, you have to make the best of it in both situations. And for me, it was a pleasure because I really did allow Keenan to make that choice about when he really wanted to get busy and wanted to be successful. I was pretty much hands off with him up until 8th grade. And then in 8th grade, he came to me after, I can remember the event. It was an event that was held in Kansas City. And he had some butt hurt after that match that he got beat, and came to me and he said that he was just tired of losing and that he really wanted to be good at wrestling. And so we shifted into another gear at that point in time. And there were some obvious ups and downs, but at the same time, it was an incredible experience for me, and certainly learned a different level of patience at times, coaching my own son. And but at the same time, it was 99% great, 1% tough.
Yeah, I can remember those particular instances where my 7th grade year, I had told him I wanted to quit. And yes, he did. He wasn't really involved up until that 8th grade year. And I was kind of frustrated with that. Everybody's like expecting this young man to be, at this standard of wrestling, and I wasn't there. And I felt like I had gone to the camps that I was supposed to. I was learning the technique that I was supposed to. I was putting in a lot of time, not seeing a lot of results. And maturity had something to do with that, physically and mentally. My maturity had something to do with that. But I remember the 8th grade year, I think, was it the Brute Nationals or something?
Yep.
That was beginning of the year. And I wrestled guy from Monette, ended up going to Monette. We were the same year. So 8th grade, going into 8th grade, beginning of the year, I wrestled Ethan Davis from Monette, who I think was a 4-time state champ at Monette.
I remember him.
But I get beat 14-0 at Brute Nationals, and I was pretty upset, as he said. And me and Donnie Horner and Derek Sanders kind of made the commitment to each other that we were going to train our butt off, and we were going to be the next group coming into Blue Springs that was ready to go. So we were there every day after high school or after middle school, 8th grade year. And I end up wrestling Ethan Davis in the kids state finals 8th grade year, and I lose to him 3-1 in overtime. And so at that point, I had seen some real progress, and I believed in myself. And that was kind of the kickstart to my competitive wrestling career.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I think that one thing I would say is I think, Keenan made a point, but I think he knew wrestling. He knew it from kind of a global perspective. He knew some moves. He knew, people. He had the chance to go to some places. But the thing that was missing is he didn't know how to train. And that was, we changed that element of it in his middle of his eighth grade year. And that's when I really think that, you started to see some things happen and I think that holds true in a lot of situations. And this is kind of detracting maybe from the actual question, but when it comes to wrestling, there are a lot of guys that know the sport, they know some moves and they know that, but they just don't know how to train. And that's what really, I think, made a difference when Keenan started to getting into the spirit, the word of training. And that's when it began in the eighth grade year. And he and Donnie and all those other guys, that came in that time period, some great guys that won state titles and individually and teams and won a lot of state trophies for us. That was the thing that I think really kind of brought success to our program, is that emphasis on training. And, when you have that, it does make a big difference. And, again, it can happen father-son. It can happen in any program. When guys learn to train, that's when the program really moves.
Some of the worst exchanges, I guess, you see sometimes between father-son coaches, but really between coaches and wrestlers in general, are like after a match. Maybe doesn't even matter if it's a win. Sometimes if it's just not a good match, however performance. So how did you guys approach that? How did you guys give each other some time before you talked, or what was the method for after a match, basically?
From my point of view, I felt like college was probably tougher for him. Not being able to kind of have that daily interaction, not have the one-on-one conversations after the matches. It was all off of kind of what I would be able to say to him, how it went afterwards. Throughout high school, I don't really remember anything ever being that difficult from my perspective. College was a lot tougher, I thought.
Yeah, I would agree. It was hard. I think looking back, watching those college matches and not having any corner involvement or anything like that. So I kind of felt like, at least from my perspective, that it was a bit distant, but I did know he was in some good hands with great coaches. It's just, as a coach yourself and knowing your son as well as you do, you certainly see some things. I did have some conversations with coaches on certain issues, or they would ask me a few things, what I was seeing. But in the big picture, I don't think high school was nearly as tough. The big concern with high school, I think, was not after matches. I think we both appreciated each other's space and knew that we had to give each other that time. And believe me, being a coach and being around the sport for so long, I had plenty of examples of the wrong way to do it. Looking across wrestling in general, you see the craziness that's actually there in youth and high school. And there's a lot of poor examples, and you can learn from poor examples as well as you do from good examples. Maybe a little tougher in the practice room. We had more of our fallouts in the practice room itself. I think Keenan still holds a record for getting kicked out of the room. And that was a big penalty. And that really frustrated him because he wanted to be in there, Keenan could tell the story of Mauricio, but
that was frustrating. Yeah, that was frustrating. But he also, that's knowing your athlete, whether it's coach, father, son, you guys know your athletes probably, pretty close to the same way, what's going to push them. And that was a pusher for me.
It wouldn't have done me any good to push Keenan harder, because it wasn't usually that was the issue in the room. When I dismissed him from the room, it was usually for other things. It wasn't, I couldn't make him go harder. It was probably the mental side of it that he just needed to get out of the room. To me, there's guys that if you left in the room and had them do some things, that might be a penalty, or it might be, behavior modification, if you will. But for him, it was just better to tell him to go home.
It was not my fault either. Never my fault.
It wasn't my fault. It was my partner.
It was.
How did you guys?
That's one story you have to share, Keenan, probably with Mauricio.
This is just one of the occasions. So this is a testament to our teams, though, and this is why I think that I was brought to a high level within that 8th grade year. I got to see what training looked like, and my freshman sophomore team, we had guys like Mauricio Garcia, Michael Toon, Ryan Clark, Luke Greco, Tyler Thompson, Josh Hauk, just kind of solid guys all down at my weight. And then we had studs up top too. Don't get me wrong. But they were just mean, just mean, kind of tough guys. And that was a big difference for me, learning how to be mean with wrestling. But I'm wrestling Mauricio. I was a 12-pounder, and I think Mauricio was a 3-pounder at that time. It was my freshman year, I think. Anyways, I'm wrestling with Mauricio, and he's got a little chip on his shoulder. He's, kind of a veteran. I was the young guy. And I'm taking Mauricio down, and he just starts, throwing these back at me. And it gets to a point I had enough. And so I take him down, he throws one, and I start going off on the back of his head. And so he kind of like MMA jiu-jitsu rolls to his back so he can punch upwards. So we're going at it. And Dad comes over and he get out of here. You're going home. I had enough of it. So I'm like, I didn't even start this. So I go to the locker room. I start taking my shoes off, and Mauricio comes in the locker room. Why do you get to go home? Why? I have to stay here. Why do you get to go home? So it's just kind of perspectives. I wanted to be there. I wanted to continue, but not that Mauricio didn't, but it's just.
How were dinners back at home? How did you guys?
Not dinner. There was no.
How was
we rarely, we were not a good example of, okay, we come home and everybody sits down at the kitchen table and has a meal at 6 o'clock, because frankly, my evening was far from over. Keenan needed his time probably to do homework or, to debrief from practice or that day at school. We're an athletic family. We had all of the guys in the family, all the girls in the family, they were active in their sports as well. So, life just didn't shut down when we came home from practice, and so that we could have that sit down at the dinner table. And maybe that was a good thing. I don't know. In hindsight, I don't know that would have gone very well anyway. So we didn't have very many evening meals together.
You didn't know Keenan was sneaking over to people's houses eating peanut butter behind your back and everything anyway. So.
He knew.
I knew which houses had it. How's that?
Those are some good stories too. Clarence Neely was staying at our house one time. We were and we would go down to McDonald's right down the street, eat our cheeseburger, and then drive back up just to go, get a meal. So that was
the truth really coming out now.
There was not a conversation really. We continued to talk wrestling when we were home. He'd be watching a clip or he'd be on a conference call or something. And we did watch a lot of film, just not necessarily on me or the team, but, higher level. And that got me excited as well. But as far as like the meals and dinner, that wasn't, a lot of times I think that kind of helped me make weight too. and for you guys that know what kind of food's in his house, a lot of times I just went without.
Oh, so Keenan, I don't know if you know this, but I'm sure you do. Your dad is like the ultimate talking to his former wrestlers and stuff, but you're his son, so even more so. Your dad is like the ultimate guy at getting in people's heads. He's the great motivator, both for good and bad. Like you said, he knew kicking you out of practice would be a punishment for you. So he's a psychological master in wrestling coaching.
Yeah.
So now that you're a coach, have you stolen some of those skills, or what do you think you have taken away from seeing that from him?
Sure. I've got to learn from a couple of the best with my dad, and then with Coach Denny and even George and Mario. They did a good job with me as well. So I've got to pick their brains a little bit. A lot of times if I ignore somebody and don't give them the attention that kind of frustrates them, they felt like they did something wrong, which is sometimes the truth.
Mhm.
But there's little tips and tricks. You guys would know that. I like to ignore them a lot if they frustrated me. Uh, they
That
can
is,
tell. I've always been somebody that kind of wears my emotions on my sleeve too, which sometimes I've got to dial that back a little bit. But they can tell when I'm frustrated, and we knew when my dad was frustrated. That remote got thrown on the ground. We were running sprints in the hallway, or something. It could have been anything. We weren't staying in our stance well enough.
mhm.
But it was just everything was at a high level. There was a very high expectation, which I'm grateful for.
Yeah. I had a couple other things I wanted to ask you guys about. Well, before we were talking about, so coronavirus obviously is everywhere right now. So, Keenan, you just want to tell what the experience is like finding out that the postseason, well, the NCAA championships was not happening
Right.
for your college guys.
Well, first off, I got to say, just apologize to the guys that didn't get to compete. The seniors with the decision with the NCAA, it's frustrating. The teams that were racing for team titles, we had Tyler Harrington, who's a two-time national qualifier. We got up there and we arrived about noon on Thursday. We're set to compete on Friday and Saturday. We get there at noon on Thursday, get a quick workout. There was probably 6 or 7 other teams in there with their wrestlers. There was a coaches meeting at, I believe, 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock. So we get a quick workout at noon. We go to the coaches meeting at 2, go straight into the next one at 3. And about 3:30, we start seeing Twitter feeds, Division I wrestlers talking about season's over and these kind of things. We're like, well, we're not hearing it yet. We're in the coaches meeting. If you're going to hear about it, now's the time. Everybody's there. And we still don't hear about it. And we get out from our second meeting, getting ready to head to the hotel. We're standing in the arena and we get a text message of, the release from NCAA. All winter and spring championships canceled. And so that was just kind of heart-wrenching. It was a very eerie feeling. I got a video of it, everybody kind of seeing it on their phone for the first time, and teams that were practicing still, they just kind of stopped and coaches were bringing them over. And you could just kind of see the pain on their faces. It was very, very different. And I hope nobody really has to experience that again. I never really got checked into the hotel. Coach Denny didn't get checked in the hotel. We jumped back in the RV and we booked it back to Omaha and then came back to St. Louis that next day. So it was very different. And so we waited until just this week to find out if Tyler would get another opportunity. And unfortunately, no, that's not the case. But yeah, it's just there's always going to be a year we remember. This is a very unique year for all sports,
Yeah.
professional and NCAA and across the, our U.S. team, it's just very different, very, very different.
That's true. It's getting tested like across the board, basically. I want to get both your guys' take on this because it's very current. But you as a coach, college coach, and you with your USA wrestling background and everything else, Coach Hag, but like on top of people losing their NCAA opportunities, just a couple days ago, it got announced that Old Dominion has cut wrestling. So, I mean, like, what was your guys' reaction to that? And just what are those kids facing, I guess, losing their program in the middle of this whole situation that we're going through right now?
Oh, wow, that's kind of a deep question, Coach. But I would say, in big picture, is that we're in some really trying times, and I don't think anybody really knows what's on the other side. Those programs that are out there now that are maybe where administrators have had some concerns, or they were looking at the possibility of cutting back on their budgets to save and put money and invested in other sports. I think it makes wrestling very vulnerable right now. I'm hoping that, I guess the collateral damage when this is all said and done isn't too deep. But I do really think that those programs that were in consideration of possible elimination or budget cuts, they could be real. I've had a chance to visit with the Big Ten office and some guys there that I work with as the coordinator of officials for the Big Ten. And I think most people believe that if we can get through this summer and football is back in place come football season, if that happens, then the collateral damage will be lessened. And if we don't have football, or heaven forbid, if we get into another season of wrestling and basketball that gets hit and the finances are really, really strapped in some of these conferences, maybe the middle level conferences and Division I, Division II, Division III, those budgets just aren't big enough to endure that. So it's a bit scary where we're at right now. I'm fairly optimistic, talking with people, and I've said this for a long time now. I do believe that women's wrestling is going to be a big salvation for men's sports and for men's wrestling across the nation. I think it's going to help, obviously, with Title IX issues. Specifically, the one at Old Dominion, I think really bothers me because there was no rumblings. Didn't really know anything that was going on there. And Stevie Martin has done a great job with that program and qualifying guys for the national championships. They had a returning All-American and early. So those things are frustrating, and we were very close to one of the, a program, though it wasn't a Division I program that was dropped, but, Keenan can speak to this, but, he had signed at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. And he had pre-signed early in his senior year, and it was an interesting situation because I was actually on the way home from the D2 Nationals that year when it was at Kearney, as I remember, and I was riding home with Gary Mayev and Dort Mayev, and we had got about halfway home, and all of a sudden I start seeing the traffic on social media in regards to the program being dropped at Omaha. And just the night before they had won the NCAA championships. And so not only did it affect, wrestling in general for me and looking across that situation, but certainly for Keenan and myself, knowing that that's where my son was going to go to college the very next year. So these things affect people. It's not just a wrestling community, so to speak. It's people personally that get hit with this. And, I feel really bad for the athletes at Old Dominion. And like I say, I just hope that, in the big picture, that there's not more of this collateral damage that really does hit individuals, families, communities, et cetera, because it is a big deal. And it's really tough, I think, to get some of these programs back after they've been eliminated. We've seen that. The history is that it's a lot easier to start a program, I think, from scratch than it is to build a program back or to start it back up once it's been eliminated. There's a lot of hard feelings within universities. So it's a tough time right now. And again, I hope we get through it without too much more damage.
Yeah, it's from a university standpoint, there's probably going to be some other collateral damages done through this whole thing. Universities and colleges were struggling before, then you throw this on top of it. And like I was telling you kind of before the call, Maryville, I'm very thankful for Maryville right now. We are in, they tell us that we're in a good spot, but we had the infrastructure to kind of go online and make that transition quickly. So we're one of the fastest growing private universities in the country, and that's in large part because of the online community. When I was there, we had roughly 3,000 students, I think, and we're over 10,000 now, and that's within five years. So we are doing well as a university, but there are going to be other ones that I think, are going to struggle. And so it's sad to see. I don't think this is over.
Like whenever UNO got cut, that, like you said, they were coming off a national title and everything. And obviously a lot of work went into putting UNO and kind of moving a lot of the pieces to Maryville, but what do college programs, college wrestling programs do to protect themselves from this? Or is there anything they can do, I guess?
I got to be careful. I got to be careful so I
Okay.
don't get too personal with it. Sometimes there's not much you can do because somebody with their own agenda comes in and wipes the slate. So, which is kind of what happened at the other place. Somebody came in with their own agenda and his ego got tested. And so he just eliminated it.
Mhm.
This is probably too much information, but there was money from the outside that was brought in and raised for that program that got taken. Scholarships that were, built for wrestling, and those got taken when they cut the program. So it doesn't matter really how much you have involved and how safe you think you are. It just it can happen. They just won their third. I'll kind of give you a little bit of history. And what happened. They had just won their third consecutive title there in Kearney, 2011. And that night, Coach Denny gets a voicemail from the athletic director, and he's thinking, why in the world am I getting a voicemail right now or a phone call? He never calls. He's thinking, maybe he's congratulating us, which that obviously wasn't the case. And so they're at the team celebration. That evening, he dismisses a team. He checks his voicemail and he looks at Bonnie and said, "This isn't good." So he calls him back and lets him know that the program's dropped, over a voicemail, over a phone call. And so Coach Denny calls the team back, lets them know that night on Saturday that their program had been dropped, wrestling and football both, to make the move to Division I. And if you guys watch the ESPN Outside the Lines and The Last Maverick, you'll find that none of this had to do with financials. Coach Denny, that program, the coaching staff, they raised the money, right? Coach Denny never had a raise in 40 years he was there. So it's the financials was never really the issue with wrestling. But so Sunday morning, they get back to Omaha. They're chain linked out of their own dojo. They tell them they have 24 hours to get everything out. What kind of respect is that?
It's crazy.
So
It's
everything
crazy.
he brought down here as much as he could. All the rest is in storage. And someday I want to go up there. I keep telling him I want to go up there, and it just I want to do that for the alumni. And moving on, I'm no longer competing. I'm coaching. The alumni and the family of Coach Denny and those programs, you guys can all tell, are very important. And that's, for me, I feel a mission to help get that down here as much as possible, at least get it somewhere.
Yeah.
That was a dynasty that was there. And so it doesn't deserve to be in a storage unit.
Yeah. Jesse, you were wrestling back whenever UNO was still around. What was the perspective of them, before they were cut? Like they were kind of like you said, a dynasty, right? I mean,
yeah, so I went to UCM for 4 years, and then I was a grad assistant that last year, 2011. And they were about as dominant as it came. So I think while I was there, I think UCO won it, then UNK won it, and then UNO won it 3 years in a row. And it's one of those teams where you're looking at them and they don't show any signs of stopping. It's like you're looking at them going like, these dudes are better than us. Their third guy's better than our first guy, and you can't imagine them being stopped. And then, so it's pretty much the same as Coach Hag's story. We had gotten home from UNK from taking our three guys back home from nationals, and basically just you get up on Sunday morning, probably about the afternoon or whatever, and everybody just kind of heard that they dropped it, and we just thought that it was a joke at first. We're like, oh yeah, that's a joke. They're too good to get dropped. That can't be real. And then it came around and we started checking and we're like, oh no, that's real. So to Coach Hag and to Keenan's point, there's maybe not a lot you can do sometimes. And so that was kind of a reality for us, that we hadn't been hit with before, is sometimes it really doesn't matter how good you are. You could be cut. And of course, I mean, Coach Hag knows this. He was at UCM. I was there. That wrestling team is a team that's been threatened with being dropped multiple times, and has been able to stick around. So it's tough to tell when it's going to happen, or how it's going to happen, or why it's going to happen.
Yeah. I'm going to circle back to something Keenan said. He was talking about the alumni for that. So this is a little bit of a subject change, but one of the reasons why we've been thinking it's been fun to talk to people on the videos and everything is just because, everyone's separate right now. It's kind of a fun time to bring back together people in a different way, because normally you can't get, everyone on a Zoom call. They're busy, they're doing things, but it's a good time to kind of reconnect alumni and the history of MOWEST and stuff with the guys that are doing it now, because there is a whole, new age of guys doing MOWEST who love it, and there was a long history. So kind of tie it back to MOWEST, but I mean, what are some of your best memories from spring and summer wrestling?
Keenan, go
When
ahead.
I was competing with MOWEST,
Yeah, or in general. Yeah.
well, Fargo was always a pain in the ass. I didn't have good experiences at Fargo. I did on day one. I did not on day two. No, I enjoyed MOWEST. MOWEST was a different culture, and it was a different style of training than going through the daily grinds of Blue Springs practices. You got other people in there, other coaches in there. And I felt like that was something that was so unique with MOWEST, in the Kansas City area, that there was no territory. And I feel like sometimes people, especially in wrestling, get a little bit territorial. And I didn't feel that way with MOWEST. You could work with anybody, any team, any wrestler, any coach, and we all benefited from it. And I really enjoyed that part of it. I enjoyed the dual teams, going to the cadet duels, and just the mixture of Missouri wrestlers, going down to Oklahoma City. So I enjoyed all those times, and it was a way for me to be around other people, other coaches.
Yeah. What about you, Coach Hag?
Yeah, for me, the thing that I really like about a club like MOWEST is a little bit different than the high school environment. One, that in the high school environment, you're constantly worried about trying to train your team, get ready for the big matches, etc. And that the kids, the athletes are training with a lot of weight on their shoulders, including the team itself. Whereas with MOWEST and in a club like this, not that the MOWEST wasn't important to wear that banner, but I think guys could relax a little bit and enjoy the process of training. And you're not going from 2 duels in a week to a tournament on the weekend. It's more, you're looking at several smaller events locally, and then maybe 1 or 2 larger competitions at the end. And you also have that atmosphere of guys that really want to be there. As much as we want to believe in our high school programs, and even sometimes college programs, they're there because, let's face it, and maybe for scholarship reasons in college, they're there in the room. Maybe in high schools, they're in there because their buddies are only there, and that's the only reason that they're there. They might be there because their parents are really pushing them hard to be involved in a high school sport. But when it comes to the club, those guys are coming in there because they really want to be there. They're paying a little bit of money. Most of them are paying a little money to be involved in a club, and they definitely are benefactors of being training alongside with other guys. But the truth of the matter is, they're there because they want to be there, and that's what really motivated me as a coach, because every guy in there, regardless of whether they're from your program in Blue Springs or whether they're coming in from Green Valley Lee Summit, Ray Peck, wherever these guys are coming in from, we're all in there to try to be better. Coaches are trying to get better. Athletes are trying to get better. And it's a serious investment on everybody's part. Nobody has to be there. And that's what I think I like about it the most. And that's what, to be real honest with you, Coach, I'm kind of having withdrawals right now because that motivates me. At the end of the day, I've got these conference calls going on during the day. I've got other things in business that I've got going on, and I really look forward to those Tuesdays and Thursdays, and maybe on a Sunday or whatever, to get into the room and be around people that really want to be in there and smell the stench of a practice room.
Yeah.
MOWEST for me was that kind of taught me freestyle and Greco, and I was able to kind of get whooped up on guys like Justin Forrest and Daniel Bright and a lot of those guys. I didn't really feel like I knew freestyle or Greco before high school, and so I got great teammates, and they were there to help. They didn't care whether I was doing well in practice or not, but when we all went to the tournaments, we were together. And MOWEST, I felt like that was a special group. So, and we had a lot of good guys that were kind of the founders, the Louis Caputos, the Moore brothers. Like, I never competed with them, but man, they set the bar high. And so I think everybody kind of chased that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a good thing for MOWEST. If, sometimes you come in, you start a program, you're like, oh, it takes time to get better and better. Like, immediately the first couple of guys were like, Fargo champs were like, that's just the expectation. If you're not winning titles or doing those kind of things,
Yeah,
you're taking a back seat, I guess.
Keenan, here's your chance. All right, this is the last thing. Here's your chance in front of everybody to put your dad on blast about his coaching ability with you. Go ahead.
Again, I got to be careful. I'm only 3 hours away, and a quarantine ain't going to stop him.
No, he doesn't care.
As much as I would love to have something, I really don't have a whole lot to put him on blast. I found it was tough. It was definitely tough going through the program, and he had high expectations for me, but he always just expected me to be a leader and lead by example and whatever it was. And that kind of came natural the more I got into it, because I wanted it for myself. And maybe he can testify for that. It got easier once that was kind of instilled in me. But I came from both parents being teachers and coaches. I was around athletics all my life. I remember falling asleep in sand pits at my mom's track and field meets where she was coaching, going with my dad and throwing him in an arm spins in front of John Smith. I was just around it all the time. And so I don't really have a whole lot. He did get on me a couple times in the practice room. One time I had food poisoning. Okay. You remember this story? Yeah.
You'll probably taint it a little bit, but go ahead.
I will. I had food poisoning, and so did Chris Latner. Okay, Chris Latner went to eat dinner with us the night before MOWEST practice, and we went to some Mexican restaurant, and Chris and I both had chicken burrito or something, and so we both get food poisoning, but we didn't get it until the next day. So I go to class. I'm sitting in class. I'm in like first or second hour, and I had already gone to the bathroom 5 or 6 times by second hour. And I'm like, Dad, you got to send me home. Like, and he would never do this. Like, my dad would not tough it out kind of deal. So I'm like, Dad, I'm not kidding. You have to send me home. I'm not even sitting in class. Like, my teachers are asking where I'm at. So he sends me home, and I go out to the parking lot, and I look around, and I'm like, Chris Latner drove this huge F-350, F-250 or Dodge truck, big red truck. And I'm looking out in the parking lot, and I don't see his truck. I'm like, he got food poisoning. So I call him. I say, hey, C-Lat, what are you doing? He's like, man, I got food poisoning. I'm like, me too. You want to come over? It's like, so he comes over, and we're just playing Call of Duty. We're playing video games all day. Still had food poisoning throughout the day, but nothing else to do. Comes like 5 or 6 o'clock for MOWEST practice, and nothing had got better yet. And it's like 6:30. Say practice started at 6. It's like 6:30. And Sealat's mom calls him. I'm like, that's not good. That's not good. So he answers, and she's like, you know, Debbie, right? She's real mild, kind of soft. And she's like, guys, I think you should come up here. Coach Hag is not very happy. I don't know if you had her call us or not. But
No.
we get up there, and we're like in the middle of practice, and I put my shoes on. I'm like kind of like I and my dad trying to keep my distance. Like I said, nothing had gotten better, right? So in and out of the bathroom every 15 minutes, and I'm just getting whooped. I'm getting whooped. Greg, who never, you know, really had put a whooping on me quite yet like this, he starts laughing. Greg starts laughing. You know, he's like, I'm like, what's so funny? He's like, I'm kicking your ass. And so my dad, I get Greg laughing at me, telling me he's kicking my ass. And my dad starts, you know, throwing these names at me. And I'm like, I have food poisoning. Like, what's going on? So I go downstairs and I just start crying. And again, he sends me home. I was like, you should have left me at home. So that might have been the one time that he really like got on to me. And again, it wasn't my fault. So
It was still your fault.
yeah, I should have been there,
You
right?
went and ate the stupid Mexican food that you shouldn't have had in the first place.
I was eating dinner with my family. It was the whole family.
It's still an excuse.
Yeah. Anyway, but that was the one time he kind of laid into me as far as, you know, I was missing a practice, and I thought I had a good excuse, but food poisoning isn't a good excuse.